Welcome everyone to the September 2024 APLN Agile Professional Learning Network of Chicago meeting. I am Mike Markey. I will be your host for this evening. I am one of the original people who formed this group 15 years ago. In 2008, we started, and we've been at it ever since. The other members of the board are listed here. This is how you can find us, but you already know that because you've already found us. Our mission, as we provocatively say, is we're supporting a growing agile community, not only in Chicago, but now worldwide, because we've gone virtual. And our mission is for this community to try to shape the direction that agile is going to take in the next decade, which, as a group that's been around for 15 years, we can at least lay a certain amount of credibility to that claim. And that is as far as I will take it. We have a podcast that is associated with us. It is called Here's This Agile Thing. I am one of the hosts. Jeff Singleton, one of the other leaders of this group, is also one of the co-hosts, and Matt Beam is the third co-host. And Jim Benson was one of our guests recently. So if you go to htat.show, you can find the links to all of our shows. There have been about 64 of them now, I think, and that we've published. There's more in the works. There's more every week. I think Jim was right around 60, 61, somewhere in that area. Let's see. For those of you who are part of the Scrum Alliance family of products and you are looking to renew your stuff, this session is good for count them, two SEUs. And so you can use those to further your certification stuff. Are there any questions that any of you have at this point? All right, well, I will welcome you all, and I will now welcome to the stage Jim Benson, our speaker of the evening. And Jim, would you like to give us a couple of minutes on who you are?
Who I am. I am Jim Benson. I've been in Agile and Lean for a very, 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 very painfully long time. My first Agile project was when I was still a consulting and civil engineer. So as a transportation engineer and urban planner. One of my colleagues and I got a project to build a tree management database with GIS capabilities. And we're like, wow, how are we going to do this? And a friend of ours said, hey, you should meet this friend of mine named Kent. He's going to write this book. So we got this pre-press version of XP Explained, and then we started writing this stuff. And we're like, wow, this is a lot more fun than building roads. So we went off and started a software company and started off doing Agile. And back at that point, there were no rules in Agile. Now it's all rules. And so we accidentally, because we needed to, invented Kanban. So we invented Kanban, and the next thing you know, sorry, anybody who's here to get their Scrum certification stuff, but we were immediately excommunicated from the Scrum Alliance by Ken Schwaber because we had the nerve to say, maybe you don't always need to have 2-week iterations. My long-term background is I kind of started off in high school as a punk rocker, then went off to become an urban planner, and then went off to do the software thing, and then accidentally invented the stuff. And then next thing I knew, it was my entire life. So we wrote the personal Kanban book. Tony Ann, my business partner and colleague, she and I wrote that in 2009. And it has been a very wild ride since then. So if you've ever used Lean Kanban, Lean Coffee, or personal Kanban or anything like that, or if you ever used Trello, that's basically based on our work. And it's been a very wonderful and bumpy ride. If you stop sharing your screen, I can start sharing mine and just dive right in.
There
All
you
right,
go.
there we go. And portion of the screen and share, and oh, comes right up. Doesn't that look almost intentional? Oh, there we go.
It does.
So what I want to talk about tonight is visualization and visual management in general, and about building things better than Kanbans and doing stuff better than Scrum or XP. So I've been involved in just about every transition that there's been in the process development world, in agile or in lean, in knowledge work or in manufacturing, any way you want to roll it out, we've managed to work in it. And let me squeeze that over here like that. There we go. So this is how I want to work the night. So when I first moved to Seattle, in 1989, I walked into the 40-story building that I was going to work in. I grew up in Grand Island, Nebraska, and I went to school in Lansing, Michigan. So 40-story buildings were like a big deal for me. And so I walked into the building and walked into the offices where I was going to work at Parsons, Brinkerhoff, Quaid, and Douglas. And the first thing I saw was a great big piece of cloth on the wall, which ended up being a NAMES Project AIDS Memorial Quilt panel for a guy named Francis Edward Elliott, who was a senior vice president of the company. And I walked in there thinking, how are these guys going to deal with, me and my ponytail and my not straightiness? How's that going to work for them? And I walked in and instantly I was like, this isn't going to be so bad. This might actually work. So the quilt, when I joined up with the quilt, we had about enough panels in it to fill a basketball court. When I left, there was over 50 square miles of quilt. So it was the largest public art project and the largest memorial in history. And it was all collaborative and it was all visual. And it worked because of that. So I got to take it to Mormon temples and to Teamsters halls and things like that, where they were like, wouldn't get caught dead near anybody who wasn't straight. And especially then, they absolutely welcomed the quilt because the quilt was a visualization of information. And that information was depersonalized, depoliticized by just the nature of its physicality and its visualness. We do that at work, or we can do that at work too. So when we have endless meetings, when we have endless squabbles with people on Slack about the way things should be, when we make a decision and then everybody 2 weeks later has a different memory of that decision, all of those things can be solved through visualizations. And as we work, we engage in change. And your work, like it says here, your work is a ton of change. Okay. So I want to take a quick detour over to this frame. This is the frame of Frameworks frame. And basically, where I'm at right now is I am totally over frameworks. If you bring me a framework, I'm going to be like, okay, whatever. So I'm going to apply the George Box rule to all frameworks. So all models are wrong and some are useful. And all models that are useful for a specific period of time and in a certain context, right? So Agile stuff is useful. Scrum stuff is useful. XP stuff is useful. Kanban stuff is useful. Lean stuff is useful. Six Sigma stuff is useful. Prince 2 stuff is useful. ITIL stuff is useful. All of these things are useful, but they're terrible if we just take them at face value. So what happens is that frameworks frame how we look at our work. And so I know that we've all been places where they're like, we don't do that because we're agile. We don't document our work because we're agile. We don't talk to that other team because our team is protected from the other teams because we're agile. Blah, blah, blah. Anti-pattern crap we don't want to do, insert because we're agile. So that's what I would call a fixed mindset frame. And so when we were asked to leave the Agile community because we said that people didn't need to necessarily do 2-week iterations, that was a fixed mindset frame. It was also based on loss-oriented framing, which is people had invested a lot of time and money in this very specific mechanism of work, and they didn't want to hear anything that could munge that up. Well, human beings munge that up every day. because we're all a bunch of wacky random number generators, and when we get together we do weird stuff and we upset each other, and it's just the way life is. So we want to get out of this binary framing world. So we don't want to be saying like agile versus waterfall or lean versus agile or kanban versus scrum or whatever versus whatever, because versus is always a binary relationship. It's always this versus that in a world that doesn't recognize that those are the only two possibilities. So everyone should be able to look at how they work and then figure out what they need to know as a team or as a company, and then build a process around making sure that that information flows to the right people at the right time so that those people can act with confidence. So in order to do those things, we actually need to see our work and see the change and understand those relationships so that we can actually engage in continuous improvement. Nothing is sillier to me than going through a 2-week iteration where nobody thinks about change at all, and then you have a retrospective to think about change because it's scheduled on that date. Now is the time where we think about change. It's like if you're driving in the car and you're just driving and driving and driving and you're about to hit another car, and the person you're with says, "Do you want to change lanes?" No, no, we're changing lanes in 100 miles. We've scheduled it out. We have a ritual of changing lanes every 100 miles. So go back to this thing for a little bit. So one of the things for me is the quilt said, see it and understand. Yep. But I'm going to go beyond that. I'm going to say, if you can't see it, you will never understand it. So most of the teams that I go in and work with actually have no understanding whatsoever of the work that they're doing. They cannot state what they do as a process. If you ask them what the process that they have, they're going to say Scrum. Scrum's not a process. So Deming said that if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. And in order to understand that process, you have to have a constant understanding of what the narrative of that process is. So I'm going to show you a picture now because pictures are worth thousands of words. So this, go a little bit further into here. This is a value stream mapping exercise being done in New York City several years ago. I'll get everybody in the picture there. We were mapping out the procurement process at Turner Construction in their offices in Tribeca. I loved those offices. And what we do in a value stream mapping exercise is we map out the actual flow of work and then the problems that people have with that work. But what's not in this picture is we go beyond that and we map out the relationships of people when things are moving from place to place. So this is John, this is Mikiko, this is Fuquan. So throughout this process, work might travel between John to Mikiko to Fuquan or whatever. And as that happens, you'll generally find that where those points of transition are where there are little blobs of these red problem stickies. And so one of the things that we push for is when you're doing this value stream mapping exercise, can you identify areas where you should be collaborating that you're not? So in Agile, we like to talk a lot about mobbing and we like to talk a lot about pairing. And then we have all sorts of weird religious reasons why you should or shouldn't at any given point in time. But I can make this pretty easy. You should always work with other people when there is work that you're both touching at the same time, or it's at a point where it's going to transition. So you should never just hand it to them, or you should never just email it to them. You should actually both look at it together and say, is the thing I'm giving you of sufficient quality? That when something comes up and someone can't finish it, that means generally that it is some degree of complex. There's some complexity there, and that is where you mob or ensemble or blob or whatever you want to call it. That's it. There's just two states. Do you need to work together on something or do you need to work as a group on something? No complex problem should ever be solved by less than two people. That's my categorical statement for you tonight. So, and another part of Turner Construction This is a pull planning exercise. Everyone in software development should know what a pull planning exercise is, and no one does because it's a construction thing. But here's what happens in construction. You are building a giant building, and that building is built in stages. So you'll generally build up a couple of floors, anywhere between 2 and 6 floors, and you'll like frame it out. And then when it gets framed and worked a little bit, then you'll build another, and then you'll build another, and then you'll build another as you go up. You don't just build the whole sticks all the way up because it will fall over because it won't have any structural integrity. So that means that at any given point in time on any construction site, you will simultaneously have people doing structural steel. So this woman that's in the image here, that's Karen. She's from Stonebridge Steel Erectors Incorporated. You will have people doing concrete. You'll have people doing the curtain wall. You'll have people doing HVAC. You'll have people doing drywall, blah, 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 blah. Lots of different companies that have no reason, no apparent reason to talk to each other will be on site at the same time. In the past, what happened is they would just show up, they'd throw their crap wherever they threw it. They would bring months worth of materials to the site at the same time. And the sites would become incredibly congested with crap, and people would get hurt all the time just tripping over this crap. And a lot of it is just dangerous on its own. So like all of the ductwork is really sharp. It's dangerously sharp. And so people would be getting cut on that all the time, just like walking by it. So pull planning is you start at the end of a 6-week cycle and you work your way back to today, and you say who's going to be on site when, what do you need when you're working, where are you going to be, blah 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 blah. And so these different stickies colors conform to different contractors who are going to be on site at that time. And then you look for the places where there's blobs like this, and then you make sure that there's no safety issues, there's no delivery issues, there's no sequencing issues that are going to happen here. You would not believe the number of times when I first arrived at Turner that I saw that people would where they would be cutting holes in walls that had already been constructed. Like, what are you doing? So, well, we have to do the wiring. Wouldn't that have been better before the wall went up? Well, yeah, it would have, but those people were available and these people weren't. It's like, okay. I come from software, so I understand stupid phasing. But even our stupid phasing doesn't involve actually the wanton destruction of physical objects to build something. So what was interesting was that when we did these pull planning exercises, we'd have 5 or 6 of these different contractors in there at a time. And when they hadn't done them before, they would be really distrustful and angry. They're like, how are you? One of them specifically comes in. I walked in, he looked all out of sorts, and I said, you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm okay. I just want to know how Turner's going to screw me this time. And that's the level of the relationships generally in the general contractor versus independent contractor world. And I said, the whole point of this is to make sure that no one gets screwed. And he's like, yeah, right. So we get to a point where there's one of these choke points, and he looks at and he points at it and says, see, this is exactly where we get screwed all the time. And Paul, who's this guy down here, the unflattering picture of Paul here, Paul says, well, let's fix it. And the guy looked at him and said, what do you mean? He's like, let's make sure that doesn't happen. And the guy looked like he was going to cry. He's like, really? You do that for me? So imagine in software, if we actually planned like this, right? We would never have another dependency, not a single one. Not a single one. Because when we got into these blobs, you would just pair or mob with the other team. Which is because that's what the work wants. So dependencies don't really exist. Dependencies are just that we've set up a structural system that doesn't match the flow of work. But changing our system to match the flow of work is not difficult. So these 2 visualizations are really important to me because they make people have emotional conversations by making them look at operational things. And that's where culture and process actually meet. As long as we hand over our responsibilities for process to somebody else's book, then we're not making a process that works for John and Makiko and Fuquan. And they're the ones that are actually doing the work. They're the ones doing the procurement. They're the ones building the building, right? So when we build, so everyone's going to know me as like Kanban guy, personal Kanban guy or otherwise Kanban guy. But what I believe now is that I've never seen a Kanban work unless it's attached to something else. I've never seen a Kanban work unless something silly is on it. So there's a picture that I want to show. I think it's over here. I have a lot of pictures. Yeah, it's right here. All right. So this is that same project before they went out to the trailer, right? So there's Paul. That's what Paul looks like when it's not just the back of his head. So this is the team the team at that time that's working on the project. When they got to the trailer, it was 40 people. So people are working away on the project. They've got time series data up here. They've got their Kanban-y kind of thing over here. They've got a constraints log over here. And all of those are really important. And that's all really great and whatever. But the most important part of all of this obeya, or the place where their information lives, is called an obeya, is this. It's the picture of the baby. The picture of the baby is of equal importance to the sum total of absolutely everything else on this wall. Because this is what sets the culture, and the culture is what uses the visual control and produces the building. All right. So if we're sitting around and we're using something like Jira, which is stultifying and dehumanizing, do we have any doubts that people are going to say whatever Kanban, whatever Agile, whatever process, I don't care, because the process doesn't have a picture of their freaking baby. So I want these to be human. I want them to be silly. I want them to reflect the fact that human beings are the things that build the building, provide the medical care, make the software, whatever it is that we're doing. Our work is done by humans in teams to create value. And Agile has always looked at the team, never at the value, never at the humans. Lean looks at the value, never at the team, never at the humans. Somebody has to break that trend and start looking at the people, because the people are the only thing that makes any of this worthwhile. So when we do one of those value stream mapping exercises, when we do one of these, other people are looking at breaks in the flow of work. We're looking at the breaks in the relationships between these people. And I guarantee you, every time you find that break in relationship, you will find the bottleneck. You will find the choke point. You will find the misappropriated resources. You will find the information holes or the information sinks. You will find all of those negative things, but you'll find them in a human way. And then when you fix it, Fuquan's going to be like, cool, I'm now in, I'm invested. Right? I love this stuff. I cannot tell you how much I love this stuff. And this process is really boring. This is literally buying toilet paper rolls and concrete from giant vendors. But these people all very much care about getting the building built, and they are professionals. And if they can't do their work, then they become upset and disgruntled. No one becomes upset and disgruntled because they feel like it. They become upset and disgruntled because they can't relate to each other in a way to get over here to the end of the process in a way where everybody's smiling. So when we're working together and visualizing our work, we want to make sure that we are visualizing that work so that each of those people can act at any time with confidence. We want to make sure that we know a lot of things, so that we do know Scrum, that we do know Kanban, that we do know behavioral economics. that we know enough about these things that when we're working together and somebody is out of sorts, we can figure out why before they become toxic. Okay. So, talked a little about VSMs and so forth. But I want to pop over here now to this fancy graphic, and I'm going to work a little screen magic here. Oh no, I'm going to ruin my graph. There we go. Got it. Okay, so visual controls. Hollister talks about them. I talk about them. Lots of people talk about visual controls, but very few people tell you what actually should go in one. So I thought it'd be a good idea to do that. So everybody, I'm hoping, is familiar with PDSA or PDCA, which is plan, do, study, adjust. Basically, this loop of you think about what you're going to do, you go do it, you think about what you've done, and then you adjust for the next time to suit. So in software, what happens is we should be doing PDSA pretty much constantly every minute of every day. We should always be adjusting things. So Scrum says inspect and adapt. We should be inspecting and adapting in real time, especially if we're releasing in near real time, right? We shouldn't be waiting until we get around to having a retrospective to do that. So we start off here in the P area, in the plan area, with what we call direction. And so direction is what you're going to do. What are your plans? What's a backlog of work? What's coming up? Who are you going to be working with to do that? Those things are visualized on a board somewhere. And the reason that they're visualized is because when you make the plan, if you can't see it, everyone will instantly start to remember it as happening differently than you do. That's called drift. So when you have a meeting and everybody gets aligned and then you leave, they subtly or not so subtly drift over time. And time moves very quickly now. So we have our direction, and that's up there. So let's just say easily enough, if you have a kanban, this is going to be in the backlog for the kanban. Then you have state and triggers. So state is easy. It's the easy crap in the kanban. It's a whip limit. It's a bunch of tickets. That's great. But what isn't great is if you have a way to visualize your kanban or your scrum board and it doesn't have explicit triggers, what we would all, if we were building something for somebody else, call a call to action. Our visual controls need that call to action. We thought we were going to do this, but we're doing something different. We're deviating from where we were going to go. What are we going to do about that? Right? We've hit complex work. What do we do about that? We might have to do some shared work we weren't expecting. Some emergency happened, whatever it is. Those are triggers to action. And if there isn't a visual trigger for them, then individual humans have to get triggered. And it's very hard to make a human do something that you didn't plan for. They're going to go through sunk cost fallacy. They're going to go through all sorts of cognitive bias soup before they actually say, all right, it's actually worth it for me to bring this up. Because we don't want to interrupt our friends. We don't want to get anybody in trouble. We don't want to cause any undue stress. But the board don't care. The board is saying you've been doing this and now something weird is going to happen. You need to deal with it because you are responsible. So as Kent would say, we want to strike it change when the cost of change is low. Well, the best way to do that is when the change itself raises its hand and says, strike me, as opposed for us to finally decide that it's strikeable. So we've got that. And so let's say that we've actually done that. We've made a plan. We've been looking at the state. The triggers have been making us change. Now what we're really crappy at is remembering what we've done. So if anybody here has been on a project where you've had just awesome documentation all the way through the project, I'd love to talk to you about it. But the narrative, tracking the narrative, which are the decisions you've made, the weird stuff that you've discovered, how you've steered the project in better directions, this now starts to create comfortable change because that narrative is referring back to something that no one had to be a whistleblower about. It's about the work that you expected to do and the general learning that you went through to do that work. Got the work? Got the learning. I've recorded the learning. This is the Agile Project Learning Network. We like learning. We like this part. So, this can be in any number of things. It can be in Notion. It can be in um, crap, whatever the Atlassian thing is. But I will tell you one thing, just really quickly, is that if you are doing this in a wiki, remember that it's a wiki. I've worked for no less than 5 companies over the last 6 years where I've said to people, how do you document things? And they say, we send it to the documentation team. And they're the ones that update Confluence. And I'm like, do you understand how a wiki works? Like just the basic concept. Because if you say that again, I believe that Ward Cunningham will appear out of nowhere and beat the living wiki out of you. So so any of these things need to be owned by the whole team and updated by the whole team. And sometimes that's onerous. And that's also part of your continuous improvement. How do we get the information we need to act with confidence with the least amount of effort, right? Agile does not teach you to do that. Scrum doesn't teach you to do that. Kanban doesn't teach you to do that. Lean doesn't teach you to do that. No one teaches you to do that because it's literally the hardest thing to get anybody to do. And if we don't do it, then we don't remember what we did, and then we can't adjust. Because you can't study what you don't know. So most places really what they do is they go do, then they release, and then they get in trouble, and then they plan a little bit, and then they do again. They don't pivot, they don't learn, they don't move, they just do stupid things over and over again and hope that nobody notices. And they're doing that, like Dave said about 15 minutes ago, because they want to just get the work done, which is pretty much like trying as quickly as possible to run from Hong Kong to Seattle by just running east. Don't do that. It gets deep somewhere soon. So then the last bit here, these areas down here, identity, professionalism, and culture. This is understanding kind of who the team is. Who are you as part of the team? That individuals in teams create value. This is understanding that part. But it's also understanding what your zones of control and spheres of influence are, because teams don't work in a perfect environment. And there are people out there who are not going to help you get your work done. So we need to understand up front, if we want to achieve some sort of beneficial change, who is it that we have to bring on board? How do we approach those people? Will they take our opinions at face value, or is it going to be a big negotiation? All of those things make up your zones of control and your spheres of influence. And what I've found every single time is that we are incredibly conservative over time about identifying or about defining our own sphere of influence. So I find that people are really their own worst judges of how much influence they actually have. People feel much more disempowered than they ever actually are, which isn't to say that some places don't suck, because boy, I've got stories. But usually if you start to explore your own sphere of influence, you will find that you actually have more reach than you thought you did. And this is important because when that narrative comes up about what you changed and you want to actually instantiate those changes as something that are lasting, you usually have to touch somebody else. Then professionalism, that's actually improvement, being able to learn, being able to have quality. And just like with one of the things that drives me nuts is when people say like, oh man, you need more psychological safety, go take this psychological safety class. It's kind of like saying, you have a COPD, so go take a COPD class. It's like the class isn't going to help you, but what is going to help you is understanding how to treat it. And I've never seen any of those classes teach you actually how to build a culture that says we have a group of people who actually care about these things. And then the last bit here is actually culture itself. And the most important sticky for here, there's upskilling and onboarding and stuff, but this is the one I like the most, which is the human repair sticky. Human repair is the ability of any team to notice that people in that team need to alter their way of working for a short or long period of time because something has changed. All right. So one of the easiest stories for me is when at one point, Tony Ann and I had a woman working with us named Patty. Patty was awesome. Patty was a workaholic. Patty absolutely loved, breathed, and believed in everything that we did. And at one point, Patty, who was very close to her father, lost her father. And so she was dealing with that by coming to work and burying herself in her work. And it was not a good scene. And so what we did was we went to Patty and we said, okay, your whip limit is one thing a day. You can come into work and do something, but then you got to go somewhere else and heal. And then we changed it to two, and then we, got it kind of back on track. But if we hadn't done that, she would have burnt out and disappeared pretty quickly. So this is a visualization about how to build visualizations. And I suggest you screenshot it really quickly. So I'm going to talk about a few other just kind of random, not random, but poignant use cases. And do I have 15 minutes left? Oh, okay. Okay, good. So
No, well, no, you have as many as you want,
I have as
technically.
many as I want
So
until
hmm,
people start to say,
we
would you?
got started a few minutes late, so you could have a half hour if you want a half hour. Do you want?
All right. So so here's the thing. The the notion of a visual system is that you have a group of people who need to remain in alignment about decisions that you've made and directions that you're taking. And so also at Turner Construction, sorry, these people were just so awesome. I have a lot of Turner Construction examples. Um, they had a couple of women named Amanda and Savannah, who were both very young, brand new to the company, had no positional power at all. And they were in the estimation group. I'm sorry if any of you are no estimate fans, but if you try and build a building without an estimate, good luck. So, so they're in the estimation group, which is also kind of a marginalized group because it's a cost center, which is another rant I could go on, but I will avoid going on at the moment. But there are no cost centers. But they're in this group, and they're surrounded by people who have a lot more seniority than they do. But the way that work is handed out is there's a project that's coming up, and an estimator will take on that project. So they didn't talk to each other. They were the estimation team, but they really never talked to each other, which meant they didn't learn, which meant they were all constantly making the same mistakes over and over again, or they were all randomly figuring out a new cool thing that they could a new technique they could use. So they were in the MEP, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing group, and doing the estimates for that. And they came back from one of the lean courses that had been taught, and they said, we need to put up our own kanban. And so they came in and they built initially this kanban that's up here at the top. And you can see it looks kind of kanban-y a little bit. Maybe it doesn't. And this is in this little tiny conference room, very little tiny conference, like a 10 by 10 conference room. And uh, what would happen is other humans would come into that conference room to use it because there were a finite number of conference rooms. And they would walk by this and they would leave with these sticky notes on their butts. And then all of a sudden their data was walking away. So then they went and they made a board that kind of looked like this. And then that board had white erase marker on it. And then people came in and they would leave and they would have erased the wall with their butts. So this is the butt proof board down here, which has been redacted so that you can't see what's going on. But each one of these swim lanes is a different project. You can see that each one of these swim lanes has a different set of columns for the Kanban. This is like 4 here and 3 here, 2 here and 3 here, 4 down here, 4, 5 here, blah, 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 blah. Because each project had a different set of relationships with the owners, with regulators, etc. So the procurement was actually handled in slightly or not so slightly different ways on different projects, just like software development. But we all tell ourselves, no, we do Scrum. It's like, you can't possibly do the same thing on 2 different software projects. You just can't. But again, it's a rant for a different time. But the important thing here is that we've got this board up, they've got this board up, and the first thing that they did was they said, okay, we're we're a couple of young women and no one's going to listen to us. So we're going to get our boss to tell everybody that they need to come in and do a huddle every morning in front of this board. And so they would come in and they would do a huddle. And of course, like everyone that does a huddle the first time, they screw it up horribly. It's like a 2.5 hour long huddle. And everybody's like, I want to kill you for even making us do this. So then they did the coolest thing. Say, because I live in Seattle, so I would go there every month. So I leave, I come back, and they put in this part of the board. It is so awesome. Like you see, it goes around the corner. So the first one is constraints. So people list at the moment what's tripping them up. So one person's working on this, one person's working on this, one person's working on this. But all of a sudden, when they start putting their constraints up, they start to find that they've got similar sounding constraints, and they can start to innovate together, learn together how to solve the constraints that both of them are facing. The other thing that they can see is over time, oh, we always have, like this one says equipment handover. We always have an equipment handover constraint. Like, why is that always up there? Something like that. So then the next part is comments. And comments were ongoing learning that these people were doing as they were doing it. So it might be changes in the budget, changes in ownership, something like that. And then the most important part is parking lot, which is at the beginning, if somebody spoke for more than a minute or so, they would say, we're going to put that in the parking lot and we're going to talk about it later. And what ended up happening after a couple of months is people would just walk in and just fill out the parking lot. Okay. Every day somebody else led the meeting. Very, very Scrum like, right? Even though Scrum people rarely do that, that's very Scrum like. And the other thing was then they said, okay, well, every day after that huddle, anyone who wants to stay and talk about the stuff in the parking lot will do a lean coffee on the parking lot. And so at the beginning, only the people who had something in the parking lot were staying and talking about the parking lot. After a couple of months, everyone stayed for the additional time because the information was that deep. So this went from a team, quote unquote, team of individual contributors to an actual collaborative, co-learning, self-organizing organization entirely because these 2 young women put this up. And then when they got reassigned to other projects, this board in this room outlived them, because the board was able to evolve beyond being Amanda and Savannah's board, and it was just the MEP estimation room. And it was a joy to behold. So I'll show one more thing because there's so many things that I could talk about here. But these are 2 Obeas. And this is the Obea of the project that I showed with the baby picture, actually out in the trailer. This is the Ruth Bader Ginsburg Hospital in Brooklyn. Probably the most successful project that wasn't the AIDS quilt that I've ever been a part of. And to say that for a nearly $1 billion hospital project that had a lot of high tech in it, the hospital itself can withstand a 1,000-year storm. It's amazing, and I will tell you my metric for why this is the most important project for me. When lockdown happened, for most people, it happened in the middle of the day. And so these people is no different. And the rule on this project was when a problem comes up, we fix it immediately and together. And they did that over and over again. This particular meeting is one of those events where this guy thought he was going to get sued, and he was shocked to find out that they actually just wanted to solve the problem with him. They were amazing at that. So when COVID happened, every other project in Turner, they called back to the main office and said, "What do we do?" These guys all walked into this room, sat down, looked at each other, and said, "Okay, what do we do?" Then they came up with a plan on how to operate a construction project during lockdown. They sent that plan back to 375 Hudson, and that plan became the template for the way all projects operated globally for Turner. I don't care about burn down charts. I don't care about I don't care about velocity. I don't care about throughput. I don't care about cycle time. I don't care about lead time. I don't care about any of that crap as much as I care about, do these humans know why they're there and how they can help? And these people, every single one of them, Anna, Mike, Sebastian, every single one of these people knew why they were there and what they were doing. And it was absolutely beautiful. Um, this one over here, this is another Obeya, and this is the Columbia Business School project. This is actually a kanban that flows from top to bottom with a ton of data in it. Okay, I know a lot of kanban zealots that would tell you that you can't build a kanban like that. Well, you can build a kanban any damn way you want as long as it tells you what you need to know. So even from here, I know that these pink stickies are in peril. These green stickies are just fine, and the yellow stickies are things that people should pay attention to. I know that each of these things, they flow from top to bottom, and they are wherever the sticky's current state. But what I also like here is over here in the corner. This is the problem of the day. Today's conundrum, the way I've got labeled there. And they will just these people just go into the room, and then they work together to solve whatever that problem is. And that's what collaboration is. This is what mobbing is. It's not what we make, it's not as complicated as we make it out to be. It's get off your butt and respect the other people on your team by working with them. And really quickly, just to show you that this is possible and important, I'll give us some space here. And oh, just to let you know, like, that you're not the only ones with a problem. This is a group that we worked with at Facebook. And this is their current workload. Just saying. So I love laughing at other people's pain. So over here, I want to we'll grab the faculty Obeya first and pop back for it. This is at Modus Institute. This is how we work every day. We have a distributed team of global people that work together every single day. This is our actual real-time live Obeya. We've got a workspace area here where everybody's doing stuff. We're working on designing the website here. We're working on logistics here. This is our remarketing system that we're building, calendaring, etc. And so what happens is that now everyone, every day, is in here updating stuff, working together. So all of the information that Modus has is available through here. One of the other things that should be noticed, and I'm not going to zoom in and find it because I don't want to, but in here, there's a section that basically says like important documents. And there are stickies in here with links to things that are in Google Docs or in spreadsheets or other places that isn't Miro. So this is also our knowledge base. Okay. And you know, what's nice is that you can keep things over time, so you can make decisions, you can go back and look at them. And when I talk about the value stream map, starting here and going all the way over to here, this is our, from the end game all the way back to concept. This is the standard work for releasing a class on Modus Institute. Every step, every responsibility, every bit of learning that we've done recently. These orange stickies are ways that we're currently improving the process. The little the little heads and the greens show ones that people are actively working on at this time. But whenever anybody comes up with any type of an improvement, they drop it in the appropriate place because we've gotten this broken down from, go on, zoom in. There we go. Concept and launch, infrastructure, marketing, course creation, course delivery, logistics, execution, etc. Since those are broken down, that means that we know where to find these tickets. So they're not buried in a ticketing system somewhere. They're actually attached to a visualization of the flow of value. And we know that when we want to work on things like customer experience or sales or something, we know exactly where to see all of those improvements. And seeing is an important thing. This is the actual Obeya and workspace for my cleaning toxic waste class. All right. So over here, I was doing the planning for the class. I set up a little workflow over here, but the important thing here is processing, right? So there are a series of modules which are divided up by these purple lines. So as I worked on each module, it filled in the spaces. So this is current state right down there. And so this operates as a kanban because I'm only working on one class at a time. And I know how close I'm getting to done because I know when I've gone past 3, past module 4, etc. And you can also see as you're going through how my delivery of the material has matured. So the nature of your workspace is going to match the nature of your work. Sometimes it's going to be able to happen completely in something like Miro, and sometimes it's not. And my last bit before anybody asks the question is if you're going to ask me what my favorite tool is to use for this stuff online, it's Miro. And it's Miro because you can, what, is there no silly in here at the moment? I can't believe there's no silly in here. But it's that you can be silly at any given point in time. And you can drop pictures of crazy things in and you can do crazy stuff. Who took the silly out, man? There was copious silly in here the other. That's probably why, is there was so much silly in there. Somebody said Jim's going to use this as an example, and this is just embarrassing. But the board that I was using today, that's literally just an Obeya of presentations. I've got 16 presentations that I've done this year. Here we are. Here we are at today. And that means that at any given point in time, I can pull anything from any of those previous presentations, depending on the questions that you ask. So this is what I want. I want people to make constant visual pivots. I want to make sure that everyone on your team is responsible for the work that's being done, not accountable, responsible. Accountability is what you do to people. Responsibility is what you sign up to do. That people are responsible for the work and that they can complete it. That there is zero tolerance for suckage. So when something is wrong, you fix it. You don't wait. You don't screw around and say, oh, well, I'll get to it later. But you fix it. And then everyone approaches their work with creativity and personal responsibility. And you can't do that by telling them to. You have to do that for them by building this system where they know that they have access to all of the information and they can act with confidence. That's my Obeya rant for this evening. I managed to keep just about everybody here. Well, or I should say, I managed to make just about everybody not hang up.
And some even came back.
So if anybody has any
popped out and
questions, just
came
toss them in. I see there's some stuff in chat. I'll pull that out.
Yeah,
Okay, it's
feel
not
free to
plugged.
speak up, guys, or you could just type a question into chat. But
Yeah.
in an era of personal responsibility,
Yeah.
speaking up is preferable.
Yeah, Jim, this is Dave.
Hey, Dave.
What was the hang up with the 2 week thing? I mean, most of the increments I've done have either been 3 week or 4 week, and uh 2 weeks when I've tried it, it just seems like too much of a rush.
Yep.
And I'm surprised that somebody would be so strict about that, or push back or discredit you, or I don't agree with that.
Yeah, well, thank you. Neither do I. So I don't agree with it either. And so the a couple things to note is that there isn't, like, right now everybody's trying to figure out what the difference is between agile and agility.
Sure.
And when you start to poke agile, you can't find the there. Is it 2 week iterations? No. Is it Scrum Masters? No. Is it huddle? Is it stand-up meetings? No. Is it story points? No. Then what is it? Well, it's agility. It's like, what's agility? Nice. It's like nice isn't a good enough answer for me. I need something a little bit deeper. And so in this case, like right now, part of the problem that Agile is having and why there was the big bloodletting of Agile people is that when C-level people showed up and said to Agile people, "What is your value prop?" They would say Agile. And they're like, "That, wow, I can put a negative dollar value on that, but I can't put a positive dollar value on that. I know how much it cost me, but I don't know what it did." And they could say, "Well, we got this done faster." And say, "Well, prove it." And then they say, "Well, if you got it done faster, can you guarantee that you'll always do this faster?" It's like, no, because Agile doesn't mean you're going to do things faster. So what I've been challenging the folks that we've been working with to do is to set up actual goals and attain them. Because you can prove that you did the thing that you set out to prove. So if you want to say, like, we're going to lower our defects by X, or we're going to form better collaborative relationships with the other teams, or we're going to improve the communication that we have with the end user, or whatever it might be. If you can show that you're going to do a thing and then you do the thing, then you've got your ROI. Because the thing on its own, the very delivery of it, and the fact that they bought off on it to begin with, it is its own ROI. The second thing that I want Agile people to do is to understand that the goal isn't to divide things up into chunks. The goal is to figure out what is it that the work needs in order to be completed. So last year, we rolled our online school over onto a new platform, which meant we had a lot of repetitive, fast work to do. So we did 1 week sprints in that so that we could make sure that we could set up an understanding of actually what our throughput was over those periods of time. And so we would set up a certain amount of work and then we'd see how well we adhered to it. But I see sprints used all the time for inventive work. And I even see people tout that it works for inventive work, but it can't work for inventive work because inventive work doesn't have a set sunset date. So there's another thing about Agile, which is that Agile has never been particularly good at identifying um, the why behind the what you're doing. And then therefore, when you go back and you tell C-level people we did this, they're like, "That's interesting. Why?" And then people can't actually provide a good background or a good follow-up for that.
You don't you
So
don't you
what
don't
I'm
think on that one, a user story from a product owner? I mean, the C level should be going to that person.
Well, and the C-level person, if the C-level person is going to a product owner for a user story, then then you've now put at least three levels between the person setting the value and the
I agree.
person actually providing the value.
I agree.
Yeah.
But
And
but
so
be
it's,
but you know
go
what, being on the tech side, it's very hard for me to justify what the business wants, okay? I mean, I can't do that.
ahead. So that's a big part of our toxic waste class
Yeah.
is that that's a toxic relationship, meaning that at some point somebody's going to get in trouble for doing the right thing.
All right.
And it's not just likely, it's inevitable. and then people become disgruntled, and then they will stop doing the right thing, and then all hell breaks loose. And so we were meeting with one of the tool providers the other day, and they said, it's very easy for us to sell us to project managers or product owners or scrum masters or those types of people, but it's really hard for us to sell to the C-suite because they don't get what the tool is supposed to do. And so we want to figure out how to show them how this tool is valuable to them. And I said, okay, let's just do a little bit of product development 101 here. If they're your customer, would it be a good idea if you found out what they need? Would that do you think, is that shocking to you that I might suggest that? So is that we have like this blinder where we don't think of upper management as an actual customer base. And so what we found repeatedly is that when we bring in the C-level people into a fully functional Obeya, they immediately become overwhelmed because of the richness of the data. They're like, this is totally not an executive summary. But then we will ask them, what is it that you need to know from this group? And they're like, just the stuff that's in this report. Okay, and we take the report and we say, okay, here's the report. What isn't it telling you? And then they will answer that question. So they really can't tell us what they want, but they can tell us the delta between what they need and what they're actually getting. And then we will make the Obeya provide that information. And we'll provide that information in a way that's useful to them and to the team at the same time. And suddenly we've normalized those conversations. And then when that happens, the notion of anything, time boxing, anything goes away, because then the conversation now is actually between people who are working together in the same direction to release things. So in that picture I showed of the construction trailer, Chris and Paul were both in that picture, and that's nearly a $1 billion project. That's a very large software company. So he is a CEO of a major corporation with a sunset date. And the ability to work directly with him and the entire staff was such a dream. I mean, we certainly didn't get that. Like Zuckerberg didn't stop by and look at the the Facebook stuff. But the more that you can work out who is it that we're tussling with and what are their value needs, and then you treat them like a customer and not an enemy, you almost instantly can build some sort of visualization that works for that. And I will list Comcast as the most unlikely of places where that worked out, because it's unlikely that anything works at Comcast.
Thank you, Jim.
But it did work out.
Comcast internet is working just fine today. Thank you.
Well, that's Xfinity.
Oh, they're not related. That's
Okay.
branding, man. That's just
right.
branding.
Jim, I'll tell you what would have been interesting was, people want you to make a case for Agile. I would love to see how the cases were ever made for waterfall, because you got to be kidding. I mean, there couldn't be any profit left in your company using that approach.
Yeah, well, waterfall was essentially just fucking around,
Yeah.
and then agile was fucking around in smaller increments. You can take the kid out of the punk band, but you can't take the punk band out of the kid. My Jella Biafra shows out every so often. But what does work and what has always worked, because I've never seen an agile project work like just as an agile project, but what I have seen is projects that use agile work because the people within the project are communicating. And that's like the secret sauce is are the people on the team talking to each other? Do they have a direction and a sound? And are they working together for some sort of mutual benefit? And you can work together without mutual benefit for a while. So like the police is a great example of that. They like hated each other, but they made really, really amazing music
Mm.
while they were together because because they had a specific way of working that allowed for that. Now, a lot of it was like Sting yelling at Stuart Copeland, but when they left and did their own stuff, it sounded entirely different. It's completely different.
Mm.
And so our teams aren't agile and they're not waterfall and they're not scrum and they're not anything else. They're the team. And then the team is employing some way of communicating, which becomes their way of working. And the more that they outsource that, the more that they've outsourced how they relate to each other. And then that doesn't end well.
Jim, one of the things that you brought up had to do with the looking at the breakdowns in communication being the indicators of where the bottlenecks tended to be or the problems tended to be. And so when these teams are working together, when you're bringing groups together and they're trying to solve issues, is it when they gloss over a communication? Is it when they pretend that a problem doesn't exist? Like what does it look like? Like what does the visualization show you, or how do you find the visualization that demonstrates that whole?
All right. So this is what it might look like. Um, this is a denuded of direct quotes actual value stream mapping exercise that we did with a team that an internal Salesforce team at a company. And I'll move this in so it's obvious. So the white things are like steps that you think some are always do. The yellow stickies are things that you sometimes do. The pinks are problems. Purple things are dumb, etc. And so what it looks like when things break down, because they did clean this up a little bit out over time, is you will see this flow, and then you will see the blobs. So it's all pattern matching. So there's a blob here. So why is there this blob here? And they're saying, okay, well, this is our discovery phase and so forth. And one of the beautiful things about this was mid COVID, is what I noticed during COVID was a lot of software developers who previously said things like, just tell me what to do, or just give me a user story and I'll be happy. All of a sudden they started asking why, right? And so what we realized up here was that the problems that they were having, when they say we have a problem with getting requirements to align with the platform, or they're missing vision, or they're missing this, or their release pipeline, our release pipeline uses our integration testing environment as blah 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 blah. That these are problems, but the real problems here was that they weren't having the right conversations with the right partners. So what they ended up doing, oh, that's just that. Okay, it's actually that was there to make that a purple sticky. What they started to do is they started to say, okay, at the beginning of every project, how do we want to change our project incept so that we have deeper conversations with the stakeholders? And then as we move through the project, how do those stakeholders come back into the project to work with the team, right? And what will happen is almost every single time is you get software people who generally aren't very emotionally self-aware, but they are good at being annoyed. And so what will happen is these folks will go to work and they'll get annoyed on a regular basis, and it'll just be like bastards and idiots. Like those bastards and those idiots, they're always doing this thing to me. Not I'm annoyed because there's a problem and we can fix the problem. And those problems are usually interpersonal communication problems, right? So we do our thing called a right environment exercise, which is a 5-day event where we actually get the team to define how they work, what the culture is that they want, how they communicate, and then what the tasks are that they need to do to actually build out that system and make it work. So essentially, in a more built out way, it's the Amanda and Savannah story. How do you build something with other people that give everybody ownership? And so this is a long way of answering your question, because that's the only way I know how to answer questions, is is that we'll see something here and we'll start to talk about it on day one. Then we go over and we start working on the charter, and we're going and we're asking people like these questions, like, how do we improve people's lives by what we're doing every day? So not the vision of like, if your project was done, what would it look like, and blah 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 blah. It's like, no, it's like, seriously, like, is there a reason for what you do? When you're finished, do other people say that you're the bastard and the idiot, or do they say like, thank God that this person came along and built this thing? Then we do expectations. What do you expect internally from each other and so forth? And then you talk about how you collaborate. So these are the professional boundaries that exist. So when they got over here and they started talking about about how they collaborated, they started to realize that they had a team member that wasn't part of their team. And that team member was this stakeholder over here. That stakeholder, that guy, that Andy, was a real team member. And so all of a sudden over here, you start to see all sorts of stickies show up saying, how do we involve him and a few other people in our daily work? And I'll be damned if this didn't happen. So this happens like the beginning of the day on Wednesday. And then all of a sudden, uh, Adam shows up. And so we invited him to finish the exercise with us. He's now a team member. I'm like, yes. So then we go over here and we talk about the information that people need, and then we create and like what technology do you use to communicate, and then where does information go to die? So here's some of that silly that I was talking about. So this is the tech for comms, and it's like, these are the tools that we like, these are the tools that we hate, these are the tools that we really, really hate and are just poison for us to get next to. And then they would vote and drop those things in. Here's their information architecture. These are the things that scare them. They still use Rally. That scares them. And then you go over here and we build out a roadmap, and then they do the roadmap, right? So you actually build the culture of continuous improvement as opposed to telling people stuff. So all of that is a long way of saying that when you get in and you start to unearth these emotional elements, you need to really run with them. And it's a big epiphany for a lot of people that when they're annoyed, it's an indication that something is wrong. Not that someone has wronged them, but that something structural is wrong that can be fixed. Because if you wrong me, I just call you a jerk and walk away. But if I know that there's like some weird structural thing that's just stopping us from getting our work done, well, we should probably wanna fix that.
Cool.
Still love this.
Other questions? Who else has a question? No one? Is there any topics that somebody else would like to bring up? If you don't want to avail yourself of this topic, is there something else that you would like to talk about? I had to ask.
I have maybe not a question, but Jim, I'd love to know, in your experience, what have you seen go horribly wrong with Kanban?
Oh, many things. I've seen people use them as the Kanban panopticon. where they're like, they want to start Kanban so they can just keep an eye on what everybody else is doing so that they can go and beat up on them later. I've seen people treat the Kanban method as the new Scrum, where it's like, I have to do the Kanban method exactly as David Anderson has told me to do the Kanban method. And any lockstep, and David would be the first one to say that that's not appropriate. But people feel reassured when they feel like they don't have to question the process because the process is invalid. The other thing that I've seen is, well, obviously people will show up without any whip limits and then they'll say they have a Kanban. And that is utterly inappropriate. But the biggest thing that I see where Kanban doesn't work is actually the way most people use Kanban. And so, like I said, like in our boards, since we have them in Miro, we can always put a silly picture or a comment or an indication that something has changed right on the board. Just slap it right on there. And because it's a different color and because you can zoom in and out of Miro, you can see a lot of different things. Most Kanban tools do not allow you to do anything like that. So if something's wrong with the ticket, you have to click into the ticket, and then you probably have to click into the comment itself after you click into the ticket. So in some of them, that can be 3 or 4 clicks into figuring out what the actual status of the work is. And I hate that. So any Kanban should give you immediate information from a distance about what's going on. And what's going on is more than simply just work in progress. So colors got to show the complexity of the tickets, the people who are working on it, etc. So one of the best systems that I saw was created by Jimdo. And in Jimdo, they have a board on the far left side, which is their strategic board, and it has things of like corporate importance. And then in the middle, there's a long board of just the different divisions: marketing, sales, development, security, etc. And then at the end, there's a whole bunch of really tiny boards for every single development team. And then on the board, you can see the relationship of everything that's in flight to the corporate goals. And in the corporate goals, you can see the collaborative framework of every one of those tickets. So all of the different teams at this time who are working on that particular goal. And that's again important so that there won't be any dependencies or any drop balls on something that is of corporate importance. It also helps everyone in the company see how many things of corporate importance don't get completed, so that less of them will be planned and the ones that will be planned will be better. So it is a perfect, not perfect, but it is a very nice visualization all the way from strategy through deployment. All tactics, all operations, everything covered. So that to me is kind of the ultimate version of a Kanban, and I see almost nobody do that.
I'm curious because we see a lot of organizations where you have corporate goals and then teams are doing stuff, and it may or may not align to those corporate goals. That organization, was there work outside of those goals, and it sounds like there was a lot of rigor to make sure we're doing the right things that move the needle the right way.
There was a lot of pragmatism to know that there's corporate goal work for expansion, corporate goal work for internal improvement and modification. There are division specific goals to shore up certain things that different divisions are need. And then there are team specific goals. And then inside of all of that are, of course, product related goals. So the C-level people won't become blind to the fact that the company needs to actually keep the lights on, that we do need to release features other than the features that you're super excited about, and that we do need to fix things. So they were able to work out an understanding of how all of those things fit together, which also meant over time that they were able to pick corporate goals that included the goals of those other subgroups. So then all of a sudden the company wasn't, this is my stuff, this is my stuff, this is my stuff, but now it's, here's my very thin layer of my stuff, thin layer and thin layer, and then everything else is our stuff. Very, very pretty and rewarding system to be a part of. It was fun and not common. I've only seen that a few times.
Great. What else would you guys like to ask?
You're very shy for Chicago. This is not. I know it's not Philadelphia, but seriously. All right. Well, we have what, 2 minutes?
Well,
Oh, I guess we have
technically,
30 minutes.
we have a few minutes.
Sure.
It can go for another half an hour
If needed.
if needed. But if nobody has any questions, I don't want to hold you hostage to the
Well,
lack of questions.
I'm going to tell one more human story really quick then. 'Cause I got a lot of them, and you all need to hear it because it's clear that you're all right. So screen 2. Hang. All right. So in the collaboration equation book, the first story is about a guy named Kevin Chase. Kevin was a procurement agent like those people that I showed, and he was one of the first projects that we worked with. He actually did those 2 projects that I showed, the Columbia Business School project and the Ruth Bader Ginsburg Hospital were his projects. And so he had Nobea with a bunch of different visualizations and a very large kanban in it. It's actually right here. This is like one of the early versions of it. You see it's all papery. Lots of different types of visualizations that are up just on this wall, and there were 4 walls in the room. And so at one point, this was brand new to the company, the Columbia Business School, brand new to the company. So at one point, all of the HR people from Turner were in town for like this huge on-site that they were all doing. And they all came to Kevin's room. So like 60 people smashed in this little tiny room. And they asked Kevin, they said, Kevin, you're doing all of this stuff and it's making your work easier. Does this help your work-life balance? And Kevin laughed and said, I work in construction. Nothing is going to change my work-life balance. He says, when I do this work, when I show something on this board and there's a flag here or a flag here or a flag here, Charlie Whitney or Charlie Murphy or anybody else that's above me in the chain, they know what I'm doing, they know what's stuck, and then they know when they should act. So before we set this up, every day Kevin would have to walk around the floor and talk to all of these people in leadership, and then they would basically comment on what he was doing, which meant he started every day with a critique of how he was working. And that's not fun. So then when we set up this room, they could just stop by and see the room. So they always knew what was going on and they were curious. So they always stopped by to see what was going on. So this is Charlie Whitney here. This is Kevin over here. And so now rather than Charlie telling Kevin every day, here's how I would have done that, he can watch what's going right and what's not going right. And if something's not going right, he can say, do you need some help? And Kevin can either say, like, I've got it, or I do need your help with this. I do need to escalate it. And then they would work on it. And that changed their working dynamic considerably. And so these projects get more and more and more complex. And when you bring in a new person, when you onboard a new person into the middle of a procurement project, it's like onboarding somebody into a blender. Except maybe they're a brick. I don't know the right way to use this analogy, but they come in and they just cannot figure out what's going on because there's just too many moving parts. So this is Sal, and Sal came in to work for Kevin. And so when Sal shows up in this room, he instantly sees the state of everything, where it is, what's flowing, what's not flowing, blah, 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 blah. And then he also knows what he needs to do. So there was a conference table here. You can see the chairs. He would sit every day on the other side of that conference table, and he would just do his work in here because the room onboarded Sal, right? The visual system was so descriptive that it meant that Kevin didn't have to fight with bringing the person online. So that's a person with zero knowledge of the project. So when you invite an owner into a construction trailer into the Obeya, the owner comes in, and when an owner wants to make some change, you can point to any of those visual controls and say, here is the impact of the change that you want to make. So I just want to make it clear that, like, I'm done. I'm totally done with the whole this versus that war. I think everything sucks equally. So I'm okay. I think that all models are wrong, and some are useful, and most of them are only mildly useful. But what's super useful is knowing that these things are going to be useful for a finite period of time, that you need to get a certain type of information out of them. And then when everybody shares that information, they see when it's valid and then when it starts to become invalid. And that's the secret sauce. That's how you know when the key change is coming in the jam session. Just
Takes
that
us right to
simple.
a musical reference.
Yes. So that's my piece, people. And it's the anniversary of my mother-in-law's passing away, which means we get to have chicken pot pie, because as strange as it may seem for a woman from Hong Kong, that was my mother-in-law's favorite meal. So
Right. So you've got the collaboration equation on the screen behind you. Do you want to?
yeah, my
give
editor said
everyone
that
a
if I
little?
didn't, he would axe murder me.
Do you want to? Do you want to pitch it or?
I want to pitch it. Okay, so I'll pitch three things. So the at Modus Institute, which is our online school, we talk about this stuff all the time. And the big thing that we talk about is, how do we as people work together? And we don't talk about it like we teach you it. We talk about it like we have working sessions with large numbers of professionals globally. There's some curriculum there, but we talk about all of those things together and we work on them together. So it's a collaborative system. The book, The Collaboration Equation, is about my experiences in collaboration throughout the years. It's a very personal book. It's a very long book. I was told never to write a book that long again, but it's 350 pages. But in it, I also detail how we do those right environment exercises, which is now how every project is launched at Turner Construction. And so, and a lot of people are starting to deploy it. It feels like a lot of work up front, but it saves so much time in unnecessary meetings and waste and undocumented things in the future. So it's a joy. Tony Ann and I are teaching at the end of this month, starting on the 26th, the course in Obeyas. So if you go to Modus Institute, you can get in on that course. We just founded Obeya Global. So if you think like Scrum Alliance for Obeyas, except we're not going to try and control the Obeyas, we're just going to try and facilitate their growth. We've got a global group of people who are working on that, and it's been a lot of fun. So my thing is humane management, visualizing work, and doing that in a pragmatic way that actually gives people, even CEOs, the information and the value that they need.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for doing this, Jim.
This was fun. All right.
All right. If no one else has any questions, there's just one announcement remaining, and that is when our next meeting is. And that is next month, second Thursday on October 10th. And we don't have a topic yet, but that doesn't mean we won't get one. And when we do, we'll put it out there so that people can find it. Unlike this one that came in the wee hours of last night.
That's
So.
exactly right. All right.
So.
Thanks, everybody. See y'all soon.